Welcome to No Room for Phonies, episode 127, and the final episode of 2024. So we'll share a little bit about what we're going to do in 2025.
And by the end of 2025, we will have 150 episodes.
Yeah? Oh, yeah, 24, right? Yeah, 150. Cool. So I just wanted to end the year because reading is like a really big deal for me.
And we've been talking about books in most of our episodes this year.
So I have finished reading 170 books this year. I had a goal of 175, but I'm almost 100% sure I will not get my last 5 read in like 2 days.
And I will not get 173 books read in 2 days. So I have completed 2 books, but funny. I have, I guess audiobooks, 3, 4.
Okay.
Plus the ones that we've shared together in the car. So, okay.
And the one thing is that I do know is that some of these books that I'm putting out here, I've actually listened to, not read.
Right.
So
I still legit
because I count that, right? So
if I count my audiobooks, I'm closer to 10.
So I have 12 top reads out of my 170. So they're a combination of fiction and nonfiction and all kinds of other things.
And I'll talk about my top 3 authors and books, even though I haven't finished all of the books.
So my first one is called Lady Tan's Circle of Women, and it's a historical fiction written by Lisa See, and it's actually about a woman physician in China, like in the 1800s or even 1500s.
And this was an audiobook because I remember listening to parts of it.
It's a very, very, very good story, like just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the next one is one of my favorite authors. I actually just finished reading 2 books of hers, Firefly Lane, which has become a TV series, and Fly Away, which is the sequel. Like it's the second in the series of Firefly Lane. Okay. So, but this one was The Women, and it was celebrated pretty much everywhere this year because it was the story of women in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. And it was extremely well done. So,
and was it Vietnamese women or
no, it was Canadian, or not Canadian, but North American women that went
and served,
and just their story, because we don't hear about women in combat. And
no, you don't think so much about that.
It's very good. And then the next one is called Just One Thing: How Simple Changes Can Transform Your Life, and it's a health and wellness book, and it's by a doctor. His name is Michael Mosley, and I liked it because it was just simple things that you can do. And I think I've referred to it in some of our podcasts prior to this about this book and some of the simple things that it, like walking outside, taking a cold shower, some of the things you can eat that are like, it's just simple. And so I actually am going to be spending some time.
They can transform your life and your quality of life.
Yes. And I am going to talk about this more next year in one of the podcast themes that I'm developing.
Yeah.
So the next one is called The Menopause Brain: New Science Empowers Women to Navigate the Pivotal Transition with Knowledge and Confidence. And obviously that's a women's health and wellness book. Lisa Mosconi, and I would really she talks about pregnancy, she talks about perimenopause, postmenopause, like all kinds of things. It's very scientific, which is fine, lots of studies and everything, but it also really helps explain so many things. So if you are a woman of any age, I would highly recommend that you read it, because when you go to a doctor or anyone to try to maybe get help with that phase of your life, you'll go with knowledge rather than just trusting.
And if you come, I think it's legitimate that it's scientific, because that's how many doctors think and speak, is the scientific. So if you come in with some scientific data and studies, and that might push your doctors to listen better. Sorry, because I know that male doctors don't listen to female patients very well, usually.
I have to say that our naturopath, we have a new naturopath, and he actually, I think he's read this book now, and he spends a lot of time researching and understanding things. So if
And
you can,
he focuses a lot on women's health.
yeah, so it's really cool. So the next book that I thought, and we did a podcast on this one, is The Not Nice: Stop People Pleasing, Staying Silent and Feeling Guilty, and Start Speaking Up, Saying No, Asking Boldly, and Unapologetically Being Yourself. And that's a mental health and wellness. And it was Aziz Gazipura. You can listen to our podcast about this book, but I really recommend that you
flesh
read
out
it.
the more details. And it's interesting, since I read about half of the book. Since we did the podcast about it, I've been paying attention just in conversations at work and on social media about nice guys.
Yes.
Versus, he's a nice guy. And it is kind of an insult, but they don't talk about what a kind man is like.
Exactly.
But obviously, if you distinguish between kindness and niceness, I think there's a lot of space for men who feel that they don't want to be masochistic or male chauvinist, but they don't want to become feminine either. I think that this book really speaks well towards about being kind rather than nice.
Right. And nice doesn't really get anything done.
No.
You can stand up and be nice, but it doesn't really move anything forward.
Well, often when you're nice, you're just getting pushed around.
The 5 Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride. It's just a novel by Joe Sipple, and it is really on the same vein as A Man Called Ove, and there's other books like this. It was just a good story, like touching, moving, like very cool. And then All the Glimmering Stars is just a novel based on a real life experience by Mark Sullivan, and it's about child soldiers in Uganda, and it's very, very, very deep story. So be prepared, because there's a lot. Heavy. A lot of terrible, terrible violence and things like that. The next one that I think is the Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day. And that's a mental health and wellness one, Jay Shetty. And I think we did
a podcast about this.
So you can look that one up. It really is one of the ones that set me on the path of wanting to start a meditation practice in my own life. So it's a very good one. And then The Collected Regrets of Clover is just a novel by Mickey Brammer about a woman who is actually a death doula. So be prepared, but it's a beautiful story. It's just a beautiful.
So she helps people exit. This temporal plane.
Yes, but it's a beautiful story. And then the next one is called A Woman of Intelligence, and it's a historical fiction by Karen Tanabe, and it's actually about a woman spy.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But she's actually like a mother with kids, and it's
works.
It's quite amazing. Yeah. So, and then The Midnight Library is by Matt Haig, and it's a novel, but it's kind of otherworldly, which is not usually my bend, but it was a really good story.
So is it a frame story? Like other stories happen within the story?
Yeah.
Because you're in the
Yes,
library,
and they come in and out of like this world, like it's time travel a bit.
Or like wardrobe travel?
Yes, that kind of a thing through the books, The Midnight Library. So anyway, it's a very good story. And the final one that I wanted is one that I listened to as well. It's called Harry's Trees, and it's a novel by John Cohen. And it's just this man who has he's not able to live his life. He lives his life so much out of fear, but then some things happen to him and it just turned. Anyway, it's just
I find it interesting that out of your 12 picks, so many of them are fiction, and we didn't podcast about them.
No, we didn't. We don't podcast
well, you don't want to podcast about fiction because I got a spoiler.
So, and then I just thought that I would...
Can I talk about
Yes, you talk about yours, and then I want to talk about setting reading goals just before we leave. And
I'll be vicariously
that's fine.
About this. So Well, I did finish several books, but I wanted to talk about favorite authors. One is Richard Rohr, which we've mentioned a lot before. So I think I have 4 of his books on the go. I need to pick one and finish. But I just appreciate. I never thought that a Catholic priest would be so open-minded and share a more generous way of living and thinking and belief.
And I read quite a few books by him this year, but I just didn't. I don't know why I just didn't.
Well, you read a
include
lot
them.
last year too.
Yeah, I read a lot of his books.
And then I read a lot by Seth Godin, and he is one of the inspirations for this podcast because he has published a blog every day. Sometimes it's 3 sentences long, sometimes it's lots of paragraphs, for I think more than 10 years. And he just encourages you or people to, if they have something they want to create, just to create it and do it and launch it, and not to plan and think, oh, I'll do this when I have everything arranged and laid out. It's just more develop the habit of doing it every day. Hence, we have the podcast.
Well, I actually have the habit every day because I either put out a social media advertisement of our most recent podcast, or I put something on the blog. Yeah. So I do something social media wise or blog wise
every day,
every single day.
But he also writes a lot about leadership, and I just wanted to share his recent one. So at work, I'm facing quite a bit of interesting challenges in the new year. But the title of this blog, it's called Leading Side by Side. And he talks about the orchestra and the instrumentalists, and how, in the string section, you have the first violinist, and in the wind section, you have the first flautist and all the rest of it.
Sorry for the yawn. I don't know why.
I'm that boring, eh?
Yeah, you're boring. Not
really. Anyway, he says, like, when the conductor says, okay, start this bar of music, everybody needs to come in at the same time. You can't wait for the first violinist to start the note and then all the other violinists to join, because it would sound really clunky and messy. It wouldn't have the neat, tidy beauty of orchestral music. So even though there's a leader, everybody has to jump in at the same time. And he ends this post with, coordinating our tone and our tempo creates magic, and yet we often fail to lead, preferring to follow instead. So it's just
it's that whole idea that everyone is a leader.
Everyone is a leader.
And if people sit back and say, well, that's not my responsibility, or that's not my problem, then that's where things fall apart.
Exactly.
Right? And then you end up making decisions that, could have been.
Well, and then as the quote unquote leader, I make a decision that's unpopular, and then I get sandbagged or trashed or whatever.
Yep.
And then another book, which I have read in the past and I'm rereading, is Find Your Red Thread by Tamsin Webster. And the red thread comes from the story of mythology where, I can't remember his name, Homer, maybe, went through a maze to fight some nasty beast, the Minotaur, and to make sure that he could get out, he let a red thread follow, like he unraveled a red thread as he went through the maze so that he could find his way back out. Oh. And so anyway, the book is all about if you have a big idea for your family that you want to do for life, whatever, it's to find the red thread. So it's kind of like the centering key premise, thought, belief that's going to make the whole thing become successful. And when you kind of go astray, you come back to your red thread.
That's interesting, because in the Think Like a Monk, it's called the something way. I can't remember what they call it.
Is it a meditation way?
Yeah. But anyway, it's that kind of idea, the middle way it's called, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of find that way. Mm-hmm. And interesting, in the book, The Lady Tan Circle, there's something about thread when you're married, and like they have this thread that weaves through.
Interesting.
So it's
Yeah,
that's an
I think it's an
interesting premise.
analogy that is in a lot of cultures.
Yeah, interesting.
All right. So now
So-
we can go on to your other point.
Well, no, I just wanted to talk about setting a reading goal and why I do it. I mean, I would have loved to have read 175 books this year, but I think 170 will do fine.
Pretty good.
It's not
20
bad.
something more than last year.
Yeah. So, but I think that the accountability for me of setting a reading challenge, and I use Goodreads, it's just a good way of holding myself accountable, because I know that reading isn't just about like plowing through as many books as possible. But I also know that however much I love reading, sometimes I get distracted, and then the reading I risk like letting that just fall behind. But when I have a reading challenge, it keeps the concept of reading foremost on my mind. So if I realize, oh man, I haven't read much, then I give myself a nudge like to get back in it.
Right. Well, and in
do
your
it.
daily list, you always have a certain number of pages or
Yeah,
hours or minutes,
percentage, because I use the Kindle a
right,
lot.
that
right?
you want to accomplish in that day.
Yeah. So then the other thing is just maintaining habits. And then speaking of habits, reading can just be like any other hobby. The more of it you do, the more you want to do. But if you stop, then it can be hard to start up again. So whether it's a case of making time to always read before bed or your commute or in your lunch break, whatever, reading regularly is a good way of maintaining momentum, but it can be hard to stick with it. I find that those reading goals really help me to like be the impetus to get back reading and into good habits, or motivating me to just maintain that good reading habit. And then there's the sense of achievement. Student brain, like a human brain, is weird, because one way in which my own brain is weird is that I get a very recognizable sense of achievement by finishing off projects or hitting goals.
Well,
and
every time
targets.
you close the cover of a book, you get a hit of dopamine.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously it's a lovely feeling to reach the end of a really satisfying book, but I also find it like equally satisfying to tick each book off on my reading challenge, or to see what proportion of the books I've read up to now that have been audiobooks or written by female authors, or maybe it's just me, although so like all those different, and I don't think it's just me, but this is one of the biggest rewards I get from setting goals, is just
Absolutely.
tracking the goal,
Just tracking them.
the achievement of it.
Yep, for sure.
And then when you keep track of your reading, you realize what types of books you generally read, and you can expand, search for, and read differently. So keeping track of what you read shows a record of what you've read and inspires you to plan things
Well,
differently.
just because when you buy from Amazon, or even if you go to a library, you can get the computer AI and the whatever the search bubble kind of recommends more of the same.
Yeah.
So you can quickly actually get kind of stuck.
Yes.
In,
And so I don't,
well, especially some of those Hitler bad, England good.
like German World War II books. I
There
mean,
was a season of those being
I've read
super popular.
those, yeah, but and they still are, just in different ways.
I know,
like,
I know.
But I mean, one of the things I do is
What are we
look
going
at,
to have 40 years from now writing about our current era?
I know, be interesting. One of the things that I do is look up the top 10 books for this month, or the top 10 books for 2024,
Or the prizes,
recommended.
like the Giller Prize.
Yeah,
or
those
one
kinds of
those.
things. And it's funny because today I just looked at the top 10 books recommended by authors. Pardon me, in 2024, and I hadn't read any of them.
Wow.
So it's like,
Yeah.
so, you know, there's
That's
that.
cool.
So that's our reading kind of, that's where we're at for now. And so we're going to be moving into 2025. Obviously, January 15th will be our first 2025 podcast. So it's going to be a theme year. So every month we're going to kind of talk about a book. And then the next part, sort of like an application of that book, rather
Right.
than just book after book after book after book.
Right.
So the first, we're going to expand on the theme of service in January. And crazily enough, the book that I've chosen for the 15th is the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a very old book.
By Dale
Carnegie, yeah.
Okay.
But it really speaks to the service industry and the idea of service. So on the 30th, then we're going to talk about our top 10 service industry nightmares and maybe a couple of wins that we've had, because that's been something that's been on our minds for a bit. But I really want to talk about when I looked up books to recommend if you want to improve your service in as a service industry, his book came up.
Interesting.
So it has a lot of things in it that
that still apply
to the service industry. So I thought if we started with kind of some of the basics, we could compare them to some of the experiences we've had and sort of why they went sour.
Sounds great.
So if you're looking to read more in 2025, every month I do publish the list of books that I read. So there's a lot of books on the blog. You just have to kind of say my reading list or my book list. And there's you can click on books and they'll all come up.
Right. So this is noroomforphonies.ca.
Yeah. So you can find a lot of different ideas. And what I've done for the most part, at least for the last little while, is a tiny little synopsis. So you have an idea. But I mean, as soon as you click on a book online, you get to read a somewhat summary of it. So, but I have 170 book recommendations for this year online. So I think you should be able to find something that is of interest to you. So hopefully you find this year an opportunity to read, that maybe you become conscious of your habit of always just scrolling through your phone and put your phone down and read instead.
And take up a digital book, a paper book, or an audio book.
Yeah. And I think reading is one of the things that helps us with our memory and our thinking, our cognitive thinking, which is definitely something that as you age, you definitely want to be doing. And soup's ready. Sorry if you hear that.
And emotional intelligence.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And stories, they just take us places, right? And they are an escape, and they help us to understand perspectives and help us be more objective and less judgmental. And all those kinds of skills are really good for us to work on. So thanks for joining us for episode 127. It says the 10 top reads, but it was actually 12 because I couldn't narrow it down. And 2024. And hopefully this year, 2025, is a reading year for you.
And for me?
And for you. Maybe more.
Maybe more.
All right.
Good night.